Deary me, I forgot to say on the last video, Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Barden. So I shall say it twice. Initiation into Hermetics by Master Franz Barden. And where were we? Now to step 4. Before describing the difficult exercises of the following step, I wish to point out again that the scholar is not allowed to hurry in his development. He ought to take sufficient time for this purpose if he wants to achieve a real success on the road to magic. He must be absolutely firm in all the exercises of the previous steps before turning to the following ones. Magic Mental Training 4. I shall describe here how to transplant our consciousness outwards. We must understand how to transplant our consciousness optionally into every object, animal, and human being. Similar to the concentration on objects, put some objects which you are using every day in front of you. Sitting in your habitual position, fix your eyes for a short while on one of the objects and inculcate the shape, colour, and size of it firmly into your mind. Now imagine yourself being transmuted in this object. You must feel in every way as the object itself and adopt all its properties. You have to be quite certain of the fact that you are fastened to the spot you have been put, unable to abandon it, but through an outside influence. You have also to consider the purpose of the object after being transmuted into it imaginarily. You should even be capable, by intense concentration, to regard your surroundings from the point of this object and to grasp its relationship to other objects. For example, supposing the object happens to be on the table, you feel the relationship to this table as well as to all the other things on the table, including the room in which the objects happen to be. Having managed this exercise with one object, you can gradually turn to the other things. The exercise is fulfilled if you have managed to connect each object you did select to your consciousness, so that you have adopted the shape, size, and quality of the object, and that you can remain in it for at least 5 minutes without any interruption. It must be possible for you to overlook and forget your body completely. Having managed this task, you can choose bigger objects like flowers, plants, shrubs, trees, etc. for your concentrative transmutation of consciousness. Consciousness knows neither time nor space. It is consequently an akasha principle. Nobody should be deterred by the unusual kind of exercises and by eventual failures at the beginning. Patience, perseverance, and tenacity will soon lead to the success aimed at. The scholar will learn later what significance these preliminary exercises have for the further magical work. As soon as one is able to manage transplanting consciousness into inanimated objects, the exercises with living objects will follow. It has been said before that consciousness is timeless and spaceless, and it is not necessary while doing the exercises with living creatures to have the object concerned directly before our eyes. By now, the scholar should be trained so far as to be able to imagine any creature he likes to. Let him therefore transplant his consciousness in the imagination of a cat, a dog, a horse, a cow, a goat, etc. The kind of experimental object does not matter. It might as well be an ant, a bird, or an elephant. At first one begins with the imagination of the animal in the motionless condition, later on walking, running, creeping, flying, or swimming corresponding to the kind of object in question. The scholar must be capable to transmute his consciousness in any form he likes to, and be active in it as well. He must endure at least for 5 minutes without interruption if he wishes to regard this exercise as being mastered. Adepts who have been practicing this exercise for years are capable to understand any animal and handle it by their willpower. In connection with this fact, all we need is to remember the legend of werewolves and other tales in which wizards transmuted themselves into animals. But fairy tales and legends have a far deeper significance to the magician. There is no doubt that these are cases of the so-called black magicians, who adopt all sorts of animal shapes in the invisible world not to be recognized while doing their wicked work. The good magician will always condemn such actions, and his spiritual faculties allow him to see through such creatures and to recognize the real figure of the artificer. Our preliminary exercises do not serve to induce the scholar to wicked deeds, but to prepare him for the higher magic, where he will have to adopt higher divine forms into which he will transplant his self-consciousness. If one has been trained during the exercise to the point to be capable of adopting any kind of animal shape with the consciousness, and if one can manage to maintain this imagination for 5 minutes without interruption, the same exercise has to be practiced on human beings. For the beginning, select acquaintances, friends, members of the family, whose imagination you are able to keep in mind without discrimination of sex and age. One has always to be very sure about how to transplant the consciousness into the body so that one feels and thinks oneself as being the imaginary person. From well-known people, one may turn to strangers never seen before and therefore to be imagined. Finally, you may choose people of different races and colours as experimental objects. The exercise is ended if you manage to transplant your own consciousness for at least 5 minutes into one of the imaginary bodies. The longer the spell of this achievement is, the more profitable it will become. This particular exercise gives the magician the power to connect himself with every human being, not only to know his ideas and feelings developing in the consciousness of the imaginary person, his past and his presence, his way of thinking and acting, but even to influence him according to his own liking. But still with the proverb in mind, what man is sowing, he will harvest. So the magician will never use his influence for anything bad or force people to act against their own will. He will use the great power over every human being given him through these exercises for the good only, and the blessing will never fail. The magician will learn from these facts why the Oriental scholar bestows the highest worship to his master. By worshipping the master, he connects himself instinctively with the master's consciousness, and so being influenced indirectly, his progress will be far more certain and faster as well. It is quite obvious that the Oriental training methods regard a master, in brackets, guru, as absolutely necessary for the development of the scholar. The well-known Tibetan Angkor is based on the same fundament. But in the inverted order, the master connects himself with the scholar's consciousness and transplants power and enlightenment to him. The same thing happens in the case of the mystics. The point in question being the so-called pneuma transfer.